Welcome to this episode of Wanderlust Solo Women Travel Unscripted. Real women, real stories, real journeys, and no filter. Join Gina, your host, to share the experiences and stories of solo female travelers and advocates from all over the world, with a mission to empower women of all ages, backgrounds, and life stages to embrace solo female travel with confidence and enthusiasm, while being authentic and real, unscripted. Confronting the challenges and apprehensions many women face when considering solo adventures, providing inspiration to break through those barriers. Sharing how life transitions, loss, and trauma can lead to amazing experiences, rediscovery, and life journeys. The good, the bad, and the ugly of authentic and honest travel. So let's throw out the script, get comfy, and jump right into this episode.
We welcome Aria Smith, a photojournalist from New York City. She has travelled to 20 countries and lived in 7. From photographing royals to spending weeks in the largest slums in the world, Aria has a unique perspective on travelling and what it has become. Despite traumatic events and tumultuous people she has encountered along the way, she has mastered the ability to create a life of peace by simply doing what she loves. Now, her goal is to inspire others to do the same. Let's meet Aria and dive into this episode. Hi everyone, so this episode we have Aria, and Aria is actually coming to us all the way from Albania. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Joining us very early in the morning there, so I really appreciate you getting up so early.
Of course. Thank you.
No, so it's so good to have you here, and we've got some really interesting conversations I can't wait to delve into with you, but we'll just start with our signature parcel question. So from our previous guest, if you had to choose one for your international trip, travel in business class and stay in a very basic budget hotel, or travel in economy and stay in super luxurious hotel, what should you pick and why?
I would choose the business class because I'm from the US and we are far from everything and everyone. And if I have to sit in one spot for 6, 10, 20 hours, might as well be nice. Because when I'm traveling somewhere and I'm in a new location, even if it's a place I've been before, I'm usually out and about. So I'm not too concerned about what it's like, at the hotel, because I don't intend on staying there much other than sleeping. So if I for the most part, most of my flights are anywhere from 10 to 20 hours, and there's nothing worse than being crunched up.
Yeah.
In a small seat with a not so great passenger pal, I call them, your neighbor. So if I had to choose, I would definitely choose business class. Yeah.
And I totally get that, because there's nothing worse than arriving and then feeling, and even getting home after a flight and feeling like you need a holiday after your holiday.
Yeah.
And like you said, if you're out all day, depending, like if you're going to a resort and you don't intend leaving, that's probably a bit different. But if you're intending being out all the time and all you need is a nice clean bed and a clean bathroom, it's like you're not making the most of that accommodation, are you?
Exactly. I agree. And I think it depends on the traveler, because I've met people. I met someone who worked on a cruise ship, and he said when he goes on vacation, he stays in the hotel because his job is to just hop around all around the world. So when he goes on a vacation, he doesn't leave. He doesn't. I met him when I was in Thailand. He had no interest in seeing anything, and he got really nice luxury resort, and he's able to not be on a boat, and that was it. So I think it depends on the person.
Different strokes for different folks, eh? What you want out of an experience.
Yeah.
Now, in our previous chat, with you being a photographer and the amazing things that you see, obviously, throughout your travels, I mean, you've got some incredible stories of places you've been and the things you've seen. And we touched on how social media has an influence on how we're viewing travel and seeing travel and the experiences that we're having. And I know you're very much an advocate for slow travel as well. There's vacay versus traveler, and I know there's a lot of debate whether you're a tourist or a traveler, and I suppose we're all tourists in a way, but slow travel goes beyond like, yeah, having a vacation. So what's your view? Like, how do you see that?
Yeah, I think now for me, I view it in three different categories. So I think we're all tourists, like you said. But I think there's the traveler. I think there's people who are traveling, there's people who are on vacation, and then there's people traveling for content. And I think people traveling for content are in a completely different category because people who are traveling to explore different cultures, learn about different people, different languages, and they're really absorbing the environment that they're in versus people like the gentleman who works on the cruise ship, who's literally just on vacation to relax. They don't want to do anything because their life is so hectic. And now you have a new group of people who are only leaving their house for the sake of content, which for me is not how I prefer to travel because I don't think you're really experiencing and grasping the full experience in the environment that you've gone across the world or across your country to see. You're so focused on documenting something, and as a photographer, I've learned this the hard way. Unfortunately, with my job, there's definitely been places that I've gone to where I know I have to get the shot. And then when it's over and somebody says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you went to this place." For example, I went swimming with whale sharks. And people say, "Well, what was it like being next to an animal that large?" And I don't know. I don't know. Because I was so focused swimming fast enough, and underwater photography is a completely different game. You're being tossed around by the current. You also have to stay with your buddy because you can't go in without a buddy. So you have to watch your buddy. Plus, you have an animal the size of a bus. So you're trying to manage all this. Well, I noticed some people were just sitting there taking it in, just watching. And I was so jealous of the people who were just taking it in to feel what it's like to be next to something of that magnitude. And so when you're doing something for the sake of content, I think you're missing out on a unique experience no matter where you are. And when I was in South Africa, on a boat in South Africa, the captain had said to me, when I was photographing dolphins, I was taking so many photos, and he said, "Don't forget to take a photo with your soul."
I
And
love that.
really, yeah, it changed my perspective. So when I go somewhere for work, I have one day where I shoot, and then I don't take my camera out for the rest of the trip intentionally. So like one of my best, I would say my best life moment was snowmobiling under the northern lights in the Arctic Circle at like 10 p.m. I didn't take my camera, and we were just a group of like five of us cruising through the woods at 10 o'clock at night with all the northern lights. Hands down my favorite life moment. And I didn't document it at all. Someone in my group was just flabbergasted that I did not have my phone out like everybody else. But after we did that, I said to everyone, "Oh my gosh, did you see the shooting stars?" And no one in the group had a clue what I was talking about. And the tour guide, who was native to the Arctic Circle, he said, "Oh, that's because you guys weren't your phone. Like you missed." It was literally shooting stars nonstop, and nobody saw it because they weren't looking with their eyes, they were looking at the screen. So you miss a lot of once in a lifetime moments because you're so fixated on, getting that content. And for what? To put it online so people can say wow and hit the like button?
It's
It's not
ridiculous.
worth
Yeah,
it.
and that's,
Yeah.
I've been so many places and people are literally walking around
My God.
viewing the view through the thing. It's a bit like going to a concert. They're not watching the concert,
Yeah.
they're watching the video. They might as well be sitting at home live streaming it because,
Yeah.
and I know like we touched on our previous conversation that, okay, we take all those photos and then they just stay stuck in the phone.
You don't even
And
want,
so
yeah,
who's
you don't even,
seeing them? And then I've missed out on that memory. It is, yeah. And
yeah.
those content creators you were talking about, of course there's some really good ones and some great ethical ones, but they're the ones, sort of inspiring people to travel, yet they're not actually having a true
They're
authentic
not even traveling
experience.
themselves, no. And that's why I always say to people, don't plan your trip off of what you see on the internet, because what you see on the internet is a fraction of reality, even in regards to travel. And a lot of people are just replicating what somebody else already did. I mean, like you said, there are some great ethical content creators when it comes to travel. Unfortunately, the most part, most people are just repeating themselves. This is the best restaurant. This is the best hotel. This is the best beach. Okay, that's great, but there's so much more to a country than the food and the beach. Like, Did you go and meet the native people? Did you learn anything about the language? What's the history of the country? Can you even pronounce the city that you're in? Like, none of those things are ever discussed on these channels, and I think that's the best takeaway for me, especially growing up in a city so diverse like New York. Learning about other cultures and understanding other cultures and understanding other people, I think would make the world such a better place. And it's a missed opportunity if you go somewhere and you don't do that. And as an American, I could say a lot of Americans don't do that. They will go run and find whatever burger they could find, nuggets and fries in Mexico, and I think, what are you doing? What are you doing?
I know, it's
Don't you want to
crazy.
experience another culture or step outside your comfort zone? And when you're replicating the content that you see, you're experiencing somebody else's travel experience. You're not experiencing your own. So
That's so true. Yeah, and then that's,
yeah,
and I always say to all the people that come on my trips and that, I say, come with no expectations, because I think
yeah,
sometimes they have this expectation. I mean, do research. I'm not saying not to do research
yeah,
and be prepared, but you build yourself up to certain expectations, and then you get there and they go, oh, well, this is nothing like the photo, or this is nothing like what that person. I've had this so many times, and it's like,
yeah,
well, that person, as you said, experience is different, and maybe they didn't do their research, or maybe they don't really care about that country, so they're
100%.
not sharing what's authentic.
Right. And what a lot of people don't consider, and especially from my perspective as a photographer, a lot of these content creators have curated that travel experience for the video. That's not even remotely close to what that country is like. And that's one of the reasons why I stay off of social media. I don't have Instagram, I don't have TikTok, I don't have Facebook or any of that, because I just, being on the other side of it, I know what the reality really is. And when I see people talking about like the glory of Bali, look at this is Bali. That's like 2% of Bali. They're not showing the extreme poverty and the crimes that are taking place against women. Um, Even some of the tourists that go through horrible things there and the cruel and unusual punishment for things. I remember when I was there over a decade ago where these two Australians got caught with marijuana and they were executed. And, they're just showing you the villas. And I tell my friends, that's that person's experience shaved down in a very aesthetically pleasing way to get likes so they can make money. That is not the reality of where that place is. And I think the beauty of going somewhere, even if you do go to a place that has those issues, is the understanding that these issues exist, understanding where part of the country is nice and appreciating it for what it is. But there's like a false sense of reality that's projected in the world of travel now that I think is just enhanced over the past decade.
Homogenized.
100%. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, Bali's a good example. And well, actually, a lot of resorts, they say, oh, the pristine
Yeah.
beaches. That's because someone's going out whenever the tide's coming in, or out very early in the morning and cleaning those beaches for you.
Right.
So, and we all play a part in being responsible for that too. And, sharing messages of, being a conscious traveler.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish there was more content on that. For example, I've seen people walking around in a bikini trying to get into a shrine or a mosque, and I think, I mean, don't you read? Don't you know any better? And I'm embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed. I was somewhere in South Africa, and there was a fellow American that was pretty much half naked, and everybody was staring. And I just thought, and it was outside of a mosque, and I thought, don't you? And she was taking like a picture. She was trying to be like very sexual and very provocative in front of a place of worship, regardless of the religion, even if it's not your religion. There's just this level of like social conscious that doesn't exist, I think, in
Yeah.
humans in general, but particularly in travel. People think, well, I can do this where I'm from, so I can do this anywhere. It's almost like people need to be taught a certain travel etiquettes when they're going to places that they see online that it's just fun and we're drinking and going to the cool beach, but like you have to be respectful of the country that you're in. And a lot of people don't do that, which I also find to be very frustrating.
Yeah, well, Bali's really cracking down on that, cracking down on
Really?
Yeah, the government's, they say they're bringing in new legislation, but it's not. It's actually stuff that's been there. It's just, I think they're really pushing the message that we're sort
Yeah.
of over this behavior. And it is
Yeah.
disrespectful. It's huge because Balinese people, for example, they are, kind people. They don't like confrontation, so they're likely not to say something.
To say
That
anything.
doesn't
Yeah.
mean they're approving of what's happening. And I think in this day and age of so much knowledge at our fingertips, there is no excuse for that person not to know anymore. Like,
Yeah.
to say I wasn't aware is like, are you living under a rock?
Right.
Like, I don't think
Right.
that's an excuse.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I was in Malaysia 2 years ago and was going into a temple. And before I even got to the entrance, I realized, oh my gosh, my shoulders. Shit, I was fully dressed, but even with just my shoulders, and I was like, oh no, no, I'm not in line, not me, not me. And I got back in a cab, and somebody in line was like, oh, it'll be fine, you can get in. And I was like, no, it's disrespectful. And the person who thought they can get in, of course, didn't get in. And I said, I wouldn't even feel comfortable saying, okay, well, you just give me a pass. Like, I just think I know that that's the rules. There's also a like massive sign that says what the rules are. So who am I to tell this person in their place of prayer that they should make an exception for me because I just am not following the rules? Now, I quit. I was so mortified. I quickly got out of the line. It was like, oh no, no, no. Let me go find something to cover to cover up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't, I've been many places, even in the Middle East, and it's the same
Yeah.
scenario. And I don't, and then people complain that they're getting unwanted attention. And it's, sometimes we may not agree with that country's, especially the way they may, their cultural things towards women.
Right.
We don't have to agree with it, but if we're visiting as a visitor, there's certain things we need to be respectful of.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I think that's a huge issue in travel, unfortunately. These influencers have a big influence on people, and that's just not something people touch base on, though, for some reason. I don't know if these content creators don't feel like it's as appealing or that people wouldn't want to know. I think it would do a great service to teach people, okay, if you're going to this country, these are the things that you should do to respect the locals
Yeah,
and go through those things.
100%. And in your travels, you've seen a bit like, the intro to the podcast, the good and the bad and the ugly.
Yeah.
And how have you found it traveling as an African American woman internationally? Have you found any hurdles, or are there areas that it's been beneficial?
Yeah, both. I would say both. I think it depends on the region of the world.
Yeah.
So I was most shocked going to Africa because I'm African American, so I'm the descendant of African slaves from the US. And there are certain countries in Africa that see me as different than them because I'm from somewhere else. There are some, for example, in South Africa, not really considered African because I'm American. And I even had someone say to me, oh, but you guys went to America. And I explained, well, it's not like we took a Disney cruise.
Not willingly.
We didn't really go there. We were forced and sold and chained. It was a little bit different than that. I think it's tough because people see my skin color and they don't know the history behind it. So I'm constantly asked, where in Africa are you from? And I constantly have to explain, I don't know. My family comes from slavery in the States. That part of our history was intentionally removed so we could never trace our roots, etc., etc. I would say for the most part, in other countries in Africa, especially East Africa, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Kenya, I was a lot more welcome. And when I was on a safari in Tanzania, I had a journalist in my safari truck from the States who was a white male, American male. And he said, you're very lucky because you have more access than I do here as an African American. And I said, how is that? And he said, I'm considered more of a threat. One, because I'm a man, and two, because I'm white. And white people have come to Africa and done horrible things. A lot of people think we may have some ulterior motive of wanting to, especially going to more intimate places, wanting to go into someone's village or wanting to go and, because his job is to interview people. And a lot of people didn't want to talk to him. And he said, you're not considered a threat. You're a woman and you're of African descent. So they will willingly let you in. And as I traveled through Africa, I found that to be true. If I said to someone, I'm a journalist photojournalist from America, can I take pictures of where you live, or can you take me to the village where you're from, or even walking through Kibera, Kenya, which Kibera is the largest slum in all of Africa. A lot of people told me, you shouldn't go there. You'll be killed if you go in there. You can't go in those kinds of communities. I walked through, I had no issue whatsoever. And I did notice anyone who wasn't Black was in a group. Anyone who wasn't, of African descent was in a group with a guide. Whereas for me, I was able to walk freely. People definitely looked. I mean, everyone's poking their head out of their homes.
And wouldn't you if someone started, nosing through your backyard as well?
Yeah, and I had four teenagers, and two were teenagers, two in their young 20s, who were artists from this community, and they wanted to show me how they live. So we walked through these trenches and alleys for 4 hours. It was amazing. But we got a lot of stares, and they would explain in Swahili as we were walking, like, she's a journalist, we're showing her around, and nobody stopped us, but he did say, depending on the person, they'll stop them and say, like, you can't we don't want them in our neighborhood, or we don't, and rightfully so, because even these kids were telling me, a lot of these commercials that you see, save the children of Africa, and they're starving in the video, they were like, they come here and film and they leave and they never give us a dime. Yeah. Like, they're used for content. And even with they said, a lot of influencers want to go in there because it's considered cool to go in this dangerous place and say, look at me, look, I've made it. And so what I also do as a photojournalist, when I go somewhere that's more personal and more intimate, I intentionally do not take any photos. I intentionally spend a day with the people in that place, and I just walk through and I get to know people. I usually do it for a day or two, and then I will ask permission to take their picture, and then and they know when I'm coming and when I'm coming with my camera. And one fun thing I do is I always bring my Polaroid camera so they can keep a picture, because a lot of these people the kids that I met there they didn't know what they looked like. And I asked them, have you ever looked in like a puddle to look at your reflection? And they said, we have too much pollution in the water to even see. There's so much garbage and trash in the river. They have a river, but it's completely full of garbage. So I was like, okay, on this date, I'm going to come back. A line of children waiting. It was so fun. And just something small like that. Even though my job is to document certain things, I'm very conscious of other people's privacy, because there's a lot of places in the world where people are refugees, people are fleeing countries with war, people are fleeing, an abusive spouse, and they are hiding out. Some people are there intentionally, not because they're poor and living in poverty, because they're hiding. So even with those photos, I don't put those photos on the internet. If it's the back of someone or you can't really see who they are, then yes. And I see other people who go, especially in Africa, particularly Westerners, who will take photos of them and take a selfie and post it. And I think that's so great for you. You have your photo and your content, and you can say you met some African children, but it's very dangerous because you didn't ask their parents. You don't know the situation that these kids are in. A lot of these kids are in hiding. A lot of these kids are hiding for different reasons, or have escaped countries that they weren't even allowed to leave. And you don't know where that photo is going to go, and they're hashtagging the location and putting the geo point of where they were, and it's like, just now exposed this person. So people don't think about that. And I especially with kids, I do not take pictures of kids without someone's permission, and I certainly don't post it even on my own personal website, which is difficult because you want to share the story and bring awareness to it, but you also have to be conscious of the situation that these people are in.
Yeah.
So to go back to your original question, as an African American, to have that experience, I don't think I would have had that. to the point of the other journalist, if I was an African American. They even let me in their homes. I went into people's houses and went into the schools. But then on the flip side, I've had negative experiences. For example, in Albania and Vietnam were probably my most difficult experience. Vietnam, it was more curiosity. I was in a very small village in Hanoi, and I couldn't go outside without people just staring or filming. And I'm also, I'm extremely tall. I'm 180 centimeters. So I would stand in the grocery store, significantly taller than everybody in line. And sometimes people are just staring and I'm looking over my shoulder. Okay. Or here in Albania, I'll see a kid like tap their mom and then point and look at her. I have not seen one other Black person in this neighborhood in the 2 months that I've been here. There are some people who will say things like you should go back home or go back to America, or there's someone pointed out a sign that said like we don't like Blacks. That was in another part of Albania. Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a lot of racism in every country, and I hate to say it, but as an African American, America's the worst for that kind of racism. So when I go somewhere else, if I see something like that, I'm so unfazed because I'm from a country where they will kill you because of your race. And it's far different than someone just saying, oh, I don't like you. Okay, well, that's your problem. I mean, thanks.
Yeah, and I think that's, and I don't think that's represented, strong Black women that are traveling and showing that they're traveling. I'm seeing a little bit more of it now, but, going back to what you were saying about influencers, a lot of them, are white young women, and there's such a bigger representation of other ethnicities that are avid travelers. It's just they're not reflected. It doesn't mean that it's not happening. It's just we're not seeing it.
Yeah. And I think in the Black community, it's very difficult. I think there is a lot of fear for traveling to certain countries because we are treated differently. I've definitely experienced racism in several European countries. In Asia, not so much. I do get asked a lot of random questions, and I just think, who raised you? Like somebody asked me, are your teeth that white, or is it just because your skin is brown? And I knew it wasn't from a place of hate, but I thought, how stupid. Like there's people in this world that think that way. Or do all Black people sound like Beyonce? If I did, I wouldn't be a photographer, okay?
Be part of Destiny's Child.
Absolutely. You're walking around here with this camera. And I do agree. I don't think there's a lot of representation in Black travel. I also don't. I think it's a mix of two things. I think because in general, you actually have to. I don't know if people are aware of this. You have to search Black traveler when you look for something. If you type in traveler, the algorithm puts white people at the top. It's just what it is. If you go on something like Pinterest and you type in fall outfits, it's 99.9% white women in fall outfits. If you type in Black women fall outfits, then it will show you the Black women. So the entire internet has put us in a separate category instead of include. And this goes for Asian and Hispanic and all people of color. We have to be searched. We're not considered just part of the masses, which is absurd, especially in 2020.
100%.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, Sahana, which was our previous guest, she's from India, and we were talking about this similar thing, and I've seen many Indian women travelers, and I've seen a lot of young Asian women, from especially like Korea and Japan as well. So it's just, you're right, you have to, and I suppose it's, me being a white woman, we're used to seeing just a certain thing, and it's like, you have to actually go in and search for this stuff, but it is there.
Yeah. Even if you think of like the simple things, like there will be a dance trend on TikTok or Instagram, and it's like to Afro beats or some hip hop song or something. You never see the Black person who created that dance. You only see the white kids who are doing it, and it's trending, and now it's cool, and now it's popular. But when I remember when I was in high school, that was considered to be ghetto, and now it's cool. And so it's
now we're showing our age.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's okay to do those things. So I think that's a whole nother topic and a bigger
It
issue.
really is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in terms of travel, there's pros and cons to the phrase that we use in our community is traveling while black. So if you even search on Google traveling while black, you'll see so many different people's experience, and there's even boards, like there's websites just for black travelers because there's certain places that we have to be more cautious.
Yeah. And again, that's sharing that different perspective of how it is for some people, the travel experience is for them. What it is,
Yeah,
going back to our original conversation, it's what it is for one person is not necessarily what it's going to be for the next.
right. Yeah.
And going on from that, talking about women, representing, we chatted about your grandmother traveling.
Yeah. Yes, I was raised by some iconic women. My grandmother and her sisters were born and raised in New York. They grew up in New York City during the Great Depression. So they were born in the 20s and grew up in the 30s in New York. And traveling was out of the question really for anybody during that time. And their grandmother was a slave. And so when she was freed, she moved to New York and had my great grandmother. And their grandmother, who was a slave, told them the one thing you have that none of these people, none of these racist people can take from you is your education. That's the only thing that you have that cannot be taken from you by them. So they studied very hard. They went to Ivy League schools, went to other colleges in New York. And again, I think growing up in New York is a very different experience. It's even back then was a very multicultural city, and I was raised to respect everyone's culture and everyone's religion. We have the most languages spoken in the world, so I think it's only natural to want to go somewhere and see where your neighbors are from. Because, I mean, even on my floor in New York, just the floor of my apartment building, it's Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Nigerian, and you have everything. So for them as well, they grew up through multiple historical events, particularly civil rights and women's rights, where they were told all the things they couldn't do. And like me, they were like, yeah, no, I'm gonna do what I want. I'm gonna go. You guys, those of you who are saying I can't do it or I shouldn't do it or women don't do that, that's great for you. I'll write you a letter and let you know how it went. And they found ways. Yeah, they well, their father is from Barbados, so they would go to Barbados frequently. And my grandmother became an ambassador of education in Denmark, so she got to go live in Denmark. And her sisters joined her in Denmark, and they all drove through Europe for one summer for 3 months. They rented a car, and this was probably they were young. I mean, if they were born in the 20s, so I guess in the 40s they were in college and they were driving around Europe in the 40s. Three black women in a car.
And I think, and I really think you need to pitch this. I think that would be an amazing script for a movie. I really do. That whole journey
Yeah.
from their grandmother and that message, and then going into their journey on their adventure through Europe. I can see the movie screen in my head with it. I think it would be an epic
Yeah.
story.
And every week she would write back to her mothers because there was no email, there was no cell phone. So she documented it. She would write Dear Mama, and she would write all the things that she did because her father was a World War I soldier and he died in his 30s. So because her mother was alone when they were traveling, she would send her mother a letter every week of where they were. They went to Germany, they went to Amsterdam, they went to 30 different countries in total in their lifespan.
Wow.
Yeah, so then they went back to I think they went to China maybe in the 70s. And yeah, and then they went to Morocco. I want to say they went to Morocco in like the 70s as well, and then they went back to Europe in the 80s, and then they did Central and South America. But yeah, these three black women made their way around the world, and she said the looks we would get. I mean, they have these strong New York accents, and they're very chatty women, and I'm sure they stood out. I mean, I can't imagine in the face driving through Europe and these three black girls in their 20s hopping out of a car in Poland. But yeah, so growing up with that, their house had little trinkets from all over the world and that they collected as they traveled. And seeing that as a child, for me, I thought, oh, this is everybody does this. Like this is just women travel the world. I never thought anything of it. And so when I started traveling, people would say, "Oh my gosh, you're going where?" And I thought, "Well, yeah, my grandma did. Like,
If she
why
can do it,
can't
I can do
I?"
it.
Yeah, I just thought that was normal. I thought it was completely normal. And she even has the slides of her trips. She has all these little slides.
I love
Yeah,
that story. And I mean, and that your backstory, where you grew up, you didn't necessarily have a lot of money and the social economical area that you grew up in New York. But that was
yeah,
part of your driver. You always knew what you wanted to do.
right. Yeah, my family has been in New York for 126 years from Harlem. And it never crossed my mind that I can't do something because of where I'm from or because I'm a woman or because I'm Black. Because of who I was raised by and because of the city that I was in. You saw people from all over the world who came to New York for one reason or another, whether it was by choice or whether they were fleeing something and New York really is a melting pot. I can't really speak for the rest of the country at the moment, but in New York, New
That's
York was
another
very
episode.
accepting. New York was very accepting and very culturally diverse, and it just seemed normal for people. People were traveling. I was growing up around people who were traveling because they were going back home, because they were going to visit a family member, or because they were going back to their home country to take care of business, or because they still had a home there for one reason or another. And that was even when my nana was growing up, during the Great Depression, there were people who were sad because they couldn't go back to their country. So for me, that exposure, that international exposure, that's just part of New York City. And I think a lot of people I think people know it's a multicultural and very diverse city, but I don't think they realize how much influence it has on people who are from there, because we grow up with the environment.
If you had a message, from the way you grew up to other women, especially of different ethnicities, about
Yeah.
wanting to travel and travel solo, what would your message to them be?
I mean, for me, my message would be, if that's something that you want to do it. And don't let anyone give you all of the reasons why you can't. Think of all the reasons why you can and why you should and why you want to. I mean, that's the biggest thing. And start slow. You don't have to be like these people you see on the internet that are taking these exclusive, exotic, probably trips that they didn't even pay for in the first place, or they stayed for one night. A lot of that is just, some of them didn't even stay in that hotel. They just shot in the lobby. I saw a girl taking a selfie in first class and she walked back to her seat.
Oh,
It's
that would be
like,
me.
look at my sweet. It doesn't matter where you come from, but I think you have to prioritize things in your life in general. For me, I was never someone who splurged on materialistic things. And a lot of people have said to me, you can do that when you're older. Why don't you wait till you're older? And I disagree with that as well. I think, especially in our country, 90% of the people are in debt. And we're told, I think everywhere, you're told that you should settle down, buy a house, buy a car, get a job. And I actually think it's a trap. I think it's a good way of a government getting you to stay in one place, forever pay taxes, forever pay off your debts, and you don't have that freedom. And if I had to give people advice, I would say do it the opposite. Like, go out and see what's in the world and then decide where you want to live. Just because you might meet someone and send you to the other side of the planet. You might realize what you went to school for isn't what you want to do because you experienced something in a certain country that's changed your perspective on something, and now you want to work in this field. For me, to be in your 20s and to buy a house and buy a car and lock yourself into a place without actually living and seeing the world is almost foolish, because
Yeah.
there's I feel like the highest level of education is travel. And I think what you read in a book doesn't remotely compare to what you experience out in the world. And so I didn't do that. I didn't go and buy a house. I didn't go and buy a car. And I think that's what's given me the freedom to build my business and to just go out and and do as I please. And I'm so glad I did it, because the United States isn't where I would want to invest personally. And I have so many people now that say, "Oh gosh, but now I'm stuck. I can't leave because I have to pay off my house or I have to pay off my car." And I think, oh, I'm so glad I didn't listen to anybody. I'm so glad I didn't do that.
And that's a real relevant point, because we're, even here in New Zealand, you strive to have stuff. And
Yeah.
there are other ways to live, and there are other ways of being seen as being successful. Like, a lot of that, you've got your house and your car and, your job, and that's your success. That's not
Yeah.
necessarily now. I think there's so many more options. You don't have to choose that path. And even later on in life, like, myself, I was a bit lost, just did stuff because it paid the mortgage and did all that. But even
Right.
later on in life, I think Gary Vee's a real good advocate for this. You can restart your life at 50 if you want.
Absolutely.
You don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to necessarily be when you're young.
Yeah. And I think people need to stop listening to what society tells them. That's my best advice. I had a client that said to me, "Don't take advice from someone who hasn't been where you're going." Because what do they know? And that's the case with most people. And so if someone's telling you you can't do something, but they've never even tried or done it themselves, why are you listening to them? And to your point, I think you can reinvent yourself and change your life at any point. I think it's definitely more difficult for certain people. If you had 3 kids and now you have to pay for their education and you have a home to pay for, of course that's going to make it more difficult, which is why I think it's good to see what all your options are before you commit to whatever your family or society expects you to commit to. Because look at the current climate. Things are changing for everyone everywhere, and there's a lot of people that want to make a run for it and they can't because they're tied down to something that they never really wanted to be tied down to in the first place. So I think creating a certain level of freedom so that you can live the life that you want, but also be able to get away if you need to, is invaluable.
Yeah, creating that. I think it all comes down to choice, doesn't it? Being able to have,
Yeah.
like being financial gives you a choice, and then if you're not in that position, that's when your choices get taken away.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of, to your point, people associate materialistic items with success. I have this house, I have this car, I have these clothes. Okay, and now what? You can't take it with you. Like my grandmother always said, you can't take it with you. And when all is said and done and your time is up on this earth, are you going to be patting yourself on the back because you bought a house? I mean, there's so many other things to life. Just the experiences. It's not, and I always say there's I call them stamp chasers, the people who want to get as many stamps in their passport as possible. I don't even applaud that, because you're not really experiencing the different countries. In going somewhere for 24 hours. I mean, to each their own, but
that girl that did all the countries in so many days.
I can't even.
Like that, and it's fine. To me, like visiting an airport isn't being in the country.
No. Did you step outside, spend money, eat something, and talk to people and learn something new?
Yeah.
If not, no. And I don't understand that. That's become a very big trend now as well. Like, how many countries can you go to? I have no desire to go to every country. I have the countries that I want to see, and that's it. I don't want to go everywhere. I don't really see the point in that. But for some people, it's just to say that they did it, and good for you. But I think if you're someone who's traveling and if you're really interested in learning about the world, and not just the world, the experiences that you have while traveling, I think teach you life lessons. You don't need to go to 5, 10, 20 countries to learn those things. You can go to 3 different countries, even close to you, and it can completely change your life. But I think you need to be open to receiving whatever that lesson is and having these experiences and stepping outside of your comfort zone, I think, is the biggest thing. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people from actually doing it.
And speaking of sort of following things, we had an interesting conversation about you are finding exciting and interesting, more local experiences, and you had a technique which may or not recommend for everybody. Do you want to share
Yes.
that?
Yeah. So one thing I do when I travel, I always, because I just love elderly people, and I always look for the oldest person on the sidewalk and I see where are they going, because I feel like if they're out and about in the middle of the day, they're going somewhere cool and I'm going where they're going. So I will randomly, not close by, because I don't want to creep anyone out. I will watch where they're going and follow them to see. And I ended up in some very cool places. I ended up in this shrine, this Buddhist shrine that was being built in an old Phuket town in Thailand by following this tiny little adorable Chinese man with his cart, and he was dragging all this stuff somewhere, and I thought, well, I want to know where he's going with these sculptures in his car. Or I've been to some beautiful cafes tucked into the bush in Tanzania by following an older man with his friends, and then when I got there, they were all playing dominoes. I learned how to play mahjong in China from following people down this little alley. So you'd be surprised. For me, it's elderly people and people who disappear into an alley. Now, I don't recommend this for everybody. Again, I'm 180 centimeters. Most people don't bother me on the street because I'm twice their size. So if you are concerned about your safety, eliminate the alleys, the dark alleys.
Disclaimer, we're not encouraging everyone to go down dark alleyways.
Yes, but there was a wall in Bangkok, and I saw various people disappearing behind this wall. I thought, what is in this wall? And when I looked, it was completely black. You could see it narrowing, and there was a light at the end, and it was completely blacked out. But it was a good amount of people going in and out. I thought, okay, people are going in. It wasn't just. It was locals, but occasionally you would see someone with a backpack that you knew was a backpacker. And I thought, okay, if they're going in, I'm going in. There was no sign. And so I think sometimes you just gotta wander. Be smart about wandering. And I went in and it was the coolest market you've ever seen. And there was every kind of animal in there that was being sold, legally or illegally, who knows. There was little kids sewing their toys, like making their toys and like carving wood and making their toys and running through the alleys, and all the cats had collars with these little bells, so you heard this like jingling sound as you were going through. It was just the coolest market. And then I thought, well, how do you get out of here? And it led into the main street, but it was this like secret path to get into this very cool market. That was one place that I photographed. It was amazing. It was really cool.
I just
That's
love
the
that.
other thing. A lot of people make a list. They only go by that list, but sometimes the best thing to do is just wander.
I've had the best adventures wandering and
Yeah.
sometimes getting lost, but I've found some very cool things. You've just got to be open to let that happen.
Yeah. Another thing I do is if there's somewhere that I want to go, I will use my GPS to get there. I will not use my GPS to go back. So I will mentally make notes of places as I'm walking. And then I find the coolest shops and cafes and people when I'm going back, not using my phone. So I do that one just for my strength of my brain.
Yeah,
I
that's a
don't
good
want to
idea.
solely rely on electronic device. And I think everybody should do that, because if your phone dies when you're out,
You've got
good
to
luck.
have a sense of direction. I know.
Yeah. My grandmother, they went through Europe. There were no phones. There were no
With
payphones,
that,
she said. Yeah, they had the map and they had a magnifying glass, and that's how they went from country to country with their magnifying glass and their paper maps. So I try to take some of the things that my grandmother used to do and travel that way, and it's far more enjoyable.
and I love that. And on that note, I just want to wrap up the episode, and I think that's such a
Yeah.
cool story to end it. So we'll go on to our lightning round. I'm just going to ask you a couple of quick fire
Go.
questions, just nothing too in depth, just whatever comes to mind straight away. So I've got a list on my wall just to make it easier for me.
Okay.
A word to describe your favorite solo travel moment. A word.
A word. Magical.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect. When you're traveling, is it backpack or suitcase?
Oh, suitcase. I'm too old to have a backpack. I'm too tall. The balance isn't good.
Oh, this is a good one. The first word that comes to mind, how travel has impacted your life.
Ooh, the first word. I'd say conscious.
That's really good. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Conscious.
I love that. And
Definitely.
we've got our signature bit that we started the episode with. So, what is your question for the next guest that's coming on?
Yes. So for the next guest, if you could travel during any era, which decade would you choose?
I love that. I think that's a really interesting one. So I'd love everyone to think about that. And if anyone wants to find out more about you, I know you're not on social media or anything, but
Yeah.
you've got a website, which I'll pop the link below. So you've got some amazing images on there, I must say.
Thank you.
I think they're
Thank you.
incredible. So if anyone wants to have a look, is there anywhere else you would like to share?
No, that's it. I'm in one place. That's it. I keep it
Easy to
simple.
find. Makes it
Easy to
super
find and
easy.
easy to hide.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and
Thank
I
you.
hope I can actually have you back because I think we've got lots of interesting conversations to have. So thank you,
Yeah.
Aria.
I'm glad it'd be
It's
so fun. Thank you.
been so cool to have you here.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed the conversation.
Magic. So stay tuned, everyone, and wait for the next episode. And remember, it's never too late to unleash your wanderlust.
Thanks for listening. Please share the love by liking, commenting, or subscribing, or join us in our Facebook community.